Thanks for joining us. For our next Evolution of Sport talk, we have Muthu Alagappan. He's a senior at Stanford in the Biomedical Engineering Department. Over last summer, he was a consultant with IASD, looking at the NBA. And today, his talk is going to focus on using mathematical topology to redefine the number of positions in basketball from 5 to 13. So please join me in welcoming Muthu.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Muthu Alagappan. I'm a senior at Stanford University and a consultant with IASD. IASD is a data analysis company in Palo Alto that uses mathematical topology to visualize complex data sets. And it's IASD's technology that was used to power the research behind this talk. On a daily basis, IASD uses their technology to better understand and develop treatments against cancer. So on that note, I thought I'd start with a story about medicine. So about 1,800 years ago, the physician Galen theorized that all diseases could be grouped into 4 categories based on the fluid in the body that was overrepresented during that disease: red for infections of the blood, yellow for yellow bile, white for phlegm, and black for black bile. Regardless of the type or severity of the illness, physicians believed that all illnesses could be grouped into just these 4 largely arbitrary categories. And we can't blame them. It was easy and it made sense. But many years later, science evolved at a dramatic pace, and physicians began to realize that disease classification was actually much more complex. And by doing so, for the first time in the history of the world, physicians became more than just spiritual healers. They could actually save lives. Today, I believe basketball is on the verge of a similar revolution of increased granularity. And to set the stage for that revolution, I want to begin by describing the problem with positions. So growing up, I was always taught that there are 5 positions in basketball: the point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. But 2 questions immediately come to mind. 1, why are there only 5 positions? Why not more? Why not less? And 2, how do we accurately determine what position a player plays? To delve more deeply into these problems, the first one I'm going to call oversimplification. If you think about basketball being played around this country every day, you instantly realize that there are hundreds of ways to play this game, not just 5. So why limit ourselves to 5 positions? The second problem is one of incorrect classification. Once we do know how many positions there are, we aren't very good at objectively determining what position a player plays. For example, just because I'm 5'9", anytime I play a pickup game, I'm automatically deemed the point guard, even though I have no ball handling skills. And to me, that doesn't make sense. The problem is even more serious in the NBA. LeBron James and Shane Battier are both listed as small forwards for the Miami Heat, yet they have vastly different playing styles, which makes it very difficult for Coach Spoelstra to make intelligent in-game substitutions when they're listed as playing the same position, yet when they enter the game, they're having a vastly different effect on the statistical nature of the actual game. So how do we solve this problem? I believe the answer lies in topological data analysis, or TDA. Topological data analysis is a research technique that blends the latest advancements in mathematics and computer science and has been researched in Stanford's math department for over 20 years. Topological data analysis is also used in IASD software, and it's really good at creating similarity networks like this. In a similarity network, nodes, or the circles on the graph, have data points within them, and the data points can be anything. They can be players, they can be cities, they can be people or clinical trials, anything you want. And these nodes are connected to other nodes by lines based on how similar they are. Thus, when you're looking at a similarity network, 2 nodes that are really close together are nodes that have data points that are very similar to each other. And 2 nodes that are very distant on this graph have data points that are very dissimilar from each other, thus creating a similarity network. So the obvious question for us at IASD was, what if we created a similarity network of players in the NBA? So we did exactly that. We took the 452 players in the NBA last season and described them using 7 normalized statistics: their points, rebounds, assists, steals, turnovers, fouls, and blocks, all per minute, to get a talent-agnostic description of how a player actually plays. Once we did this, we ran the network, and of course we expected to see 5 categories, or 5 flares, corresponding to the 5 positions in basketball. But we actually found something much more interesting. We found that there's 13 positions in the NBA. And for each position for the first time, I can topologically and mathematically define what it means to play that position. I can tell you which players in the NBA play which position, and I can tell you who epitomizes the position best. So here at the 2012 MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, we want to unveil the 13 positions for the first time. So listed here are the 13 positions in the NBA that were topologically defined using advanced mathematical metrics for how similar or dissimilar two players are from each other. Remember, on every one of these nodes is a set of players, and players that are closer together on the network are more similar in playing style. As you can see, the defensive ball handler is close to the offensive ball handlers, which are very far away from the paint protectors or scoring rebounders, which seems to make sense. We find this network very exciting, and today I want to highlight 5 specific insights from this network that we think can make the game so much more engaging for GMs, players, coaches, and the everyday fan. The first insight is the 13 positions themselves. For the first time, using the built-in analytical tools of the software, I can define exactly what it means to play each position. We've tried to name the positions in a way that it describes their mathematical definitions. But for example, for a scoring rebounder, I can tell you that they're above average in field goal attempts and field goals made, but that they're below average in assists and steals per minute, and so on. And I can do this for every statistic for every position. So we have an exact definition of what it means to play a position. I can also tell you exactly which players not only play the position, but epitomize the position best, i.e. who is most inlet within that position on the spatial network. And some examples are listed here. For example, Jason Terry and Tony Parker epitomize the offensive ball handler position. Marcus Camby and Tyson Chandler are very good examples of the paint protector. And Shane Battier and Ronnie Brewer epitomize the role player. These people seem to confirm our suspicion that there's more than 13 positions. In fact, in basketball for a while, we've had this feeling that there's not just 5. We started calling players point forwards or combo guards. But now we have a topological justification and an empirical evidence behind these notions. What I also want to point out is that this isn't normal clustering. In normal clustering, you have to pick the number of positions, and you don't get an idea of how spatially far away or close together those positions are. If you normally cluster, you could have a player that's on the end of one cluster, but you don't know he's at the end of one cluster. He just shows up similar to everyone else in that cluster. But in this network, because it is spatial, we can see how far away one player is within that respective position. The second insight is about team builds. Using the same network shown, I can highlight a certain team within the NBA and show how their positions are distributed within this larger network. So for example, here's Team A, a real team in the NBA last season. And here are their players highlighted in red. As you can see, Team A had 2 scoring rebounders, 2 paint protectors, 2 role players, and a good combination of ball handlers in the lower left hand of the network. Here's Team B, another real team in the NBA last year. As you can see, their positions are much more redundant. They seem to have too many players playing very similar positions, while they have 0 scoring rebounders on their team. So again, Team A with a very good diversity of positions. Just taking a second, if you can just look at the visual representation of the team and see that they're more balanced. Team B, less balanced, but they have more positions more often, the same positions more often, rather. And if you're wondering who these teams actually are, Team A is the Dallas Mavericks, who eventually won the NBA championship. Team B is the Minnesota Timberwolves, who finished last place in the Western Conference last year. Using the software, we can go through and figure out exactly which player is in which of these categories and start to put together formulas or trends for putting together winning teams. The exciting thing is, in just seconds, we can do this for every team in the NBA last year, but also for every team in NBA history. I can take a team like the '94 Rockets or the '97 Bulls or the '01 Lakers and start to plot their teams as colors within this network and start to put together formulas or trends for how to build a championship team. Maybe every starting lineup that's ever won an NBA title has an offensive ball handler starting alongside a combo ball handler and 2 scoring rebounders. I don't know if that's actually true, but we can start to put together formulas for how to build a winning team as far as the position distribution goes. The third insight is about player management. GMs, owners are always looking to trade and to make acquisitions and signings to make their teams better. And this can also be enhanced using this network. And here's an example of how player management can be improved. Here are the top 9 performing players for the Boston Celtics last season when they finished 3rd place in the Eastern Conference. The big 3, Paul Pierce, Garnett, and Allen, are listed with their respective positions, as well as the next 5 top players on the Celtics last year. Just again, visually looking at it, you can see that there's a very good spatial distribution. They have 2 very good scoring rebounders. Glenn Davis, who seems to be a combination of a scoring rebounder and a paint protector. They have a good combination of ball handlers and so on. If you look at the Celtics for this year, their top 9 players, the network looks much different. The Celtics have added another scoring rebounder when they already have 2. They've lost almost all of their diversity in the ball handler section, leaving them with only Petrus. And they've added Avery Bradley, another role player who has a very similar position to Rajon Rondo. Thus, although a lot has been written about how the aging of the big 3 at Boston is due to their decline this year, I would contend that an almost equal amount is due to the next 5. Maybe the other players, the other offseason moves that the Boston Celtics made caused their build to defer in a way that causes them to be less competitive. For GMs to be able to look at a network like this and see that we have no players in the paint protector section, maybe Boston should go after a true paint protector to give them more diversity. This type of network and visualization can hopefully help managers and teams make smarter decisions during the offseason. The 4th insight is about finding value, what hopefully any NBA team is trying to do. And again, we believe that this network can improve a team's ability to find value. So again, here's the network. And here I've highlighted in red the people who epitomize the scoring rebounder position best. Because they're most inlet within the scoring rebounder section, they characterize the position most. So that's about 20 nodes, probably about 40 players within that section of scoring rebounders. Again, all of this is talent agnostic because all of our statistics are per minute. The software tells us who these players are, and the players are listed here. And it's everyone you'd expect. Carmelo Anthony, Amari Stoudemire, Chris Bosh, Pau Gasol. All of the great scoring rebounders in the game automatically cluster with each other, even in a talent-agnostic manner. Yet there's 4 players on this network that you might not expect. Tyler Hansbrough, Hakeem Warwick, Maurice Bites, and Devin Ebanks. Yet the software tells us that statistically per minute, they're just as good as these other scoring rebounders. Ebanks averages 0.52 points per minute, which is more than Gasol, Bosh, Garnett, and Duncan. But the striking insight here is when you look at their salaries. Gasol, Duncan, Bosh, and Garnett each make over $16 million a year. Ebanks makes $740,000 a year. Yet the software puts him in the exact same category topologically as these other players that we know are successful in the NBA. And that opens us up to a new way of finding value. Maybe we can take a network like this, find players we already know are successful, such as Kevin Garnett or Tim Duncan, and then find the players that are topologically most similar to players we already know are good, thus giving us a way to find value, find good players at a low cost. We think this is a very successful strategy across the board in all positions as far as finding good players, finding the players around those good players who have high NBA potential. And the 5th insight is that this network is dynamic. So the network shown is almost a proof of concept because we use the most bare 7 available statistics in the NBA: points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, turnovers, and fouls. Yet as the data gets better that goes into this network, the network gets smarter. Thus, there's been a lot of talk at this conference about advanced efficiency ratings and new metrics for evaluating players. If we use those metrics to describe these players and run the network again, we get a much more intelligent network. It's also dynamic because it updates in real time. As we put in data from last night's game or tonight's game, the network learns. Players' positions change, the network evolves, and again, we get smarter. The network isn't going to look the same for every year of the NBA, which is one of the great insights about it. And the other thought is that we really believe this is an evolution of sport because this idea works not just for grouping players, but it works for grouping anything across sports. You can group coaches or teams or lineups or plus-minus matchups and start to figure out really interesting topological insights. So now I want to shift briefly away from the story about the 13 positions to talk about two more things that I think we've all found very interesting. So the first is Jeremy Lin, and obviously the question is, could we have predicted his success? And the honest answer is, using this software, probably not. But we can answer two very important questions about Jeremy Lin. The first question is, what position does Jeremy Lin play on this network? And based on last season's NBA data, he was a role player, which is the same position as Shane Battier and Rajon Rondo. Obviously, this year, his statistics are much different. He probably plays a different position. And once we create the network for this year, we'll be able to have that data. The second question is, who was Jeremy Lin most similar to in his senior year at Harvard in D1 college men's basketball? So to answer that question, we created a similar players network of the 3,400 players in college basketball the year Lin was a senior at Harvard. Out of the 3,400 players, 3 players stuck out as being most similar to Jeremy Lin. And the question is, who are those 3 players? First was DeMarcus Cousins, who will be a future All-Star in the NBA. Second was Alec Burks, who was a lottery pick the year after Lin went undrafted. And third was Nick Radio, who spent some time in the NBA D-League. Thus, although we couldn't have predicted Lin's unprecedented success, we could have told you before he even entered the NBA that he was most similar in NBA potential to DeMarcus Cousins, Alec Burks, and Nick Radio. So I guess the real question isn't could we have predicted Lin's success, but instead it's who's going to pick up Nick Radio. And the final thing I wanted to talk about was the NCAA tournament, which is upcoming. So like I mentioned, we can create similarity networks using anything, not just players. So we did exactly that for the teams in NCAA D1 men's basketball. We created a similarity network of teams. And this is what we found. The network looks like this. The network is colored from blue to red, with red being the highest win percentage. Thus, all of the teams in the red categories up there have the most wins, have the highest winning percentage for last season in men's basketball. And what's really interesting, if you just look at the graph, is that there's actually 3 categories of high-win teams in NCAA basketball, and they're all different from each other. All of the high-win teams don't group together. As you can see, there's a UConn and Butler way to win, there's a Duke and UNC way to win, and there's a Kentucky way to win. And there's groups of teams in each of those categories that are shown, which is interesting. We can also use the network to figure out exactly what characteristics cause these 3 teams' playing styles to be different. And we found out exactly what statistics causes Duke and UNC and these other teams to be different from Kentucky, to be different from UConn. And being at Stanford, I had to find Stanford on this network. Stanford is right here. Obviously not one of the high-win teams. They're in green. But what's cool is we can take a team that's not in a high-win category and figure out what statistics or how they should construct their team to move towards one of these high-win clusters. So in conclusion, I just want to return to the story about medicine. It's a scary thought that physicians once believed that all diseases fit into just 4 categories. But fortunately for us all, science has evolved from that misconception to a new view that brings an unimaginable amount of granularity to illness. Today, I have proposed that basketball is on the cusp of a similar revolution. Increased granularity in sports will bring a host of tactical, business, and competitive advantages for players, coaches, GMs, and the everyday fan. But this is just the beginning. By looking at the shape of data in terms of topological similarity networks, we can revolutionize this sport and many others in tremendous ways. In fact, there are many other really cool insights that we've already found that I didn't have the time to share today about how to better draft players, how to predict injuries, and how to use plus-minus lineup data to see which players and what statistics to focus on against any lineup, against any team in the NBA. This is only the beginning of a revolution in sports founded in mathematics and topological data analysis. And I look forward to the many evolutions that are soon to follow. Thank you again so much for your time. And I can take a couple of questions, but I'd be happy to chat about the advanced math that goes into this or anything else after, outside, or whenever.
Hi, a question over here. Can you, when you pulled up the chart of the Timberwolves, there were a couple red spots on NBA first team. Can you explain what that is? And then also, too, is looking at Rondo's stats, he seems to do pretty well, and I'm assuming you normalize over playing rates, but he seems to score, assist, and rebound decently. How is he considered a role player? This is more of a asking about the definition of what role player is.
Yeah, so I can hopefully answer both those questions in one answer. So I didn't get the chance to go into what it means to play each position, the mathematical definition of it, but kind of very simply and high level, an NBA first team position is someone that does every statistic really well. So they're above average in every statistic. So that's Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and so on. An NBA second team player is someone that does every statistic really well, above average, but not as above average as the first team, which is why both of those networks are disconnected from the larger network, the two first team and second team networks, because they're so unique in that they're better at everything. The entire role player network is kind of the third tier. They're almost the third team in that they do everything well, but they do nothing spectacularly well. So to your point about Rondo, I think Rondo does seem to do many things across the board well. He gets a lot of triple doubles, and I think that's exactly why he's in the role player position, because he's not spectacular enough to be in the first team, but he seems to be above average in everything, which is why he's kind of in his own network with other role players. And as far as who the Timberwolves player is in the first team, I don't exactly remember the name, but I can find it in 2 seconds. So if you want to come find me after, I can pull out my laptop and let you know who that is. But again, this is talent agnostic groupings, so it may not seem like a first team player, but the reason they're in the first team network is based on per minute statistics. They jump out as having similar per minute statistics to the other first team players. So again, that's kind of a way to find value in a sense.
I really like the spatial component you have, and I'd actually love to chat with you offline about that. But as far as it being talent agnostic, wouldn't you say that a lot of the statistics are, but I would say points, it's hard to say that's talent agnostic because Monta Ellis has been well documented as someone who scores a lot, but not very efficiently. So I would say that, wouldn't you think of, to try to capture, especially on offense, talent agnostic statistics being more of, how do they score their points? Where do they take their shots from? And things like that. Wouldn't that make it a little more talent agnostic?
Yeah. So
in terms of scoring, at least.
Right. I think you're exactly right. And I think when I said talent agnostic, I mean more playing time agnostic. So regardless of how much playing time they get, they're scoring the same number of points. But to your question, I think you have a very good point. And again, this is more of a proof of concept network using the most bare statistics, more to prove that we can group players based on similarity using a range of statistics. This software and topology is actually set up to handle thousands of dimensions, thousands of variables at once. So in an ideal world, we'd give it statistics about where they shoot from on the floor, like a lot of the spatial talks that have gone on today. We'd give them statistics about how many dunks they take, how many layups do they make, just as many variables as we can give the data to really tease out what the positions are. This is more to prove that the ability to create similarity networks in basketball, I guess, has some value.
If you go to the Boston Celtics page, your one-of-a-kind players were Ray Allen and Jermaine O'Neal, but your definition for one-of-a-kind player in your original example list was LeBron and Dwight Howard. Is there, how is Dwight Howard and Jermaine O'Neal in the same category?
Yeah, that's a good point. And the answer is that they're not connected to each other. So if you look at the one-of-a-kind players, they're all disconnected nodes. I just kind of pulled them over to the same place on the picture, but they're not similar players. That's why they're disconnected. If they were similar players, they'd have a line drawn between them. But everyone in the one-of-a-kind is kind of their own position, right? So you can actually think about this as the 65 positions of basketball with the 45 one-of-a-kind players and then the other so on, right? So they're not similar players, but everyone in the one-of-a-kind position is a player that has a playing style based on these statistics that is so unique that the software couldn't draw a line between them and anyone else.
For the college example, is there anything that controls for the fact that Jeremy Lin's playing against Ivy League competition and his stats per minute is going to be probably inflated compared to someone in the SEC or one of the major conferences?
So to create the players network in college, so for the NBA players, we use only 7 statistics, and for the college one, we use several more. So we use a lot of statistics about the team, also about the players in the conference. We're normalizing everything once again. So we do take into account a lot of the who they're playing against and that they have a weaker schedule. But at the same time, if you actually look at the players' network, the players don't seem to group according to conference. In Jeremy Lin's node, you have DeMarcus Cousins, who played at Kentucky, and then you have players like Nick Ravio, who didn't play at big schools at all. So it seems like there is a pretty good distribution. But again, when you're designing the data that goes into this software, you could design it in a way to get rid of that bias if you were interested in doing so.
When you were talking about Jeremy Lin earlier, you also alluded to the fact that if you look at his stats from this season versus last season, his position would probably change. What kind of sample size really would you need to be able to draw one of these maps for a season? Do you have to wait till the end of the year, or could you do it after a quarter of the season, half the season, et cetera?
That's a great question. You can do it anytime. You can do it after one game, or you can do it after as many games as you want. So right now, we're using 7 statistics to categorize the players, and that's per minute averaged over all the games we're using. We could actually use 5,000 dimensions, with each dimension being an individual game. So you could have 10 columns just for one game, another 10 for another game, and you could just keep doing this on and on, creating a huge matrix, and you'd get probably an even more valuable result. So the answer is that it's creating a network based on similarity of the data matrix you give it, but the matrix can be as big as you want, and probably the bigger and richer it is, the better the network is. But we could update the network tonight based on this season's data, and we could tell you what position Lin plays right now. We just haven't done it. But.
Hey, I had 2 questions. First, as far as the defensive positions go, did you play around with any other variables besides like the box score kind of steals and blocks kind of things? Any other defensive stats to assess those positions? And then also, if a player had no serviceable NBA skills at all, would they just show up in the one-of-a-kind region alongside, as their own node, but in the same grouping with kind of LeBron and Dwight and all them?
So LeBron is actually in the NBA first team category. Dwight Howard is in one-of-a-kind. I think if a player had no skills, they'd probably be in the one-of-a-kind category by themselves, unless there was another player with no skills. As far as the defense, again, a great point. And I think this goes back. So we just used steals and blocks, and that was enough to separate kind of the ball handlers from the paint protectors. So the paint protector position is one that is very above average in blocks, kind of above average in rebounds, and so on. And we can come up with statistical tests to quantify how much better they are. And the ball handlers tended to be higher in assists. And we can also color this network. So right now the network is colored by points per minute. So everyone in red in this network has the highest points per minute, and blue is the lowest points per minute. So the paint protectors average the lowest. Obviously the first team is pretty red. The shooting ball handlers are pretty red on here. But yeah, we can use more advanced defensive metrics as they're available to us to make the network smarter defensively.
Just wondering how stable are your results over time? So do players jump around as you update your data and so forth? Because otherwise it would drive GM crazy, right? Every day my map looks different, right?
Yeah, so we haven't done a lot of kind of testing how dynamic it is or how much it changes. My hypothesis would be that it wouldn't change much, because the data that we're giving it is over such a long time period that one data point is not going to skew it that much. But if a player does change, is that volatile? I think that's something GMs would want to know. If a player tends to have such a playing style that's so different day to day or against so many opponents, that might be useful to know. So maybe that's something we're looking for, actually.
Did you find generally when you looked at the results that more successful teams did show the type of diversity across the categories that you were saying might be hurting the Celtics this year as opposed to last year?
Yeah, exactly. So I think as a general rule of thumb, we found that more diversity in the network, like Dallas has, was a good thing. And that's kind of a very rough hypothesis that being spread out is good. I think that means that teams have to scheme against you kind of in a more complex manner. They can't guard against the same position or playing style again and again. With Minnesota, you kind of take away a few of these positions and they can't really do much. So I think versatility or diversity is very good. With more in-depth study, we can start to put together very concrete trends. For example, one of this position and 2 of this position is really good in the fourth quarter, or and there was a talk in the research portion about the big 2s and big 3s that did exactly that. So I think that would be the logical next step. But for now, I think diversity is a good rule of thumb to go for.
Yes. Did you have a chance to look and see, as a team changes its composition via trade or whatever, that players' positions change along with it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we haven't had the chance to do that, but I think that's something we're going to do very soon, is look at how the people you play with affects how you play and what kind of position you play in, because I'm sure Jeremy Lin would have a different position with the Knicks that he did with the Rockets. The other thing we've done is we've taken lineups, so a 5-on-5 lineup as one data point, and we've taken thousands of those data points over the course of a season and looked at when you put 5 players on the court, what statistics should those 5 players focus on against a certain opponent 5 players to maximize your success. So in that case, we're taking into account exactly what you're talking about with situational data points. So we've been focusing on that question in a different aspect, not with this network, but I think this network could address it as well. Yeah, thank you guys again so much.